Bengus is one of the most well-known fighting game artists with a ton of iconic Street Fighter illustrations. There is no doubt that Bengus is responsible for many of the visual aesthetics of the Capcom fighting games. However, the key element that makes him stand out among his peers is that his art style goes far beyond technique alone. When we break down and analyze Bengus' illustrations, it is clear that he doesn't have one particular art style. The thing is, he can switch between them all. Over the years, he went from traditional to embracing digital art, evolving his works into the more modern anime styles. Note that the overall art direction of each game is quite specific, where he and his peers all have to adhere to. Nonetheless, there are some tropes that do reoccur, but it's more gesture and intent based than technique alone. But I have to admit, it's a blast to analyze. Before we dive into that rabbit hole, it's important to mention that Capcom had an internal art guide since the 90s. This guide contains specific design rules that their new internal artists had to follow when depicting characters. For those interested, this Street Fighter character design art book includes some pages from this guide. It describes concepts such as the need for in-game sprites to have visual cues that are clear enough for players to react to in split-second decisions. This means that the art often features exaggerated muscles, hands, feet and limbs in all fighters. Also, certain characters have specific personality restrictions to keep them in check with the overall narrative. Other side characters like Zangief and Bengus' favorite character, Sakura, are a bit more easygoing. When we purely focus on his art style, it all depends on the game project he's working on. Simply put, Bengus is involved with most of them in one way or another, and on first glance he doesn't seem to have a single style that sticks around like almost all other artists do. To quote him, "If I don't quite grasp something, I won't hesitate to look it up, but I tend to not look at reference images while I draw." For sure, Bengus is the one who set the tone for many fighting games. However, Capcom seldom discloses which in-house artist is exactly responsible for the main art style. For example, Bengus started with the Alpha series with Ikano and Daichang, but Edion joined in Alpha 2. That said, I think Bengus' Street Fighter Alpha works are from another world. I just love the shonen anime style with a ton of energy. The Alpha series had to stand out from its competitors, and that's why style was one of the keywords during development. These sprites were used so many times in spin-off games as well, and Bengus was asked to make the promotional works for them, because his art translates so well into the in-game graphics. With that said, what are the recurring elements in his art style? Well, I'll be frank. On the technical side, he switches so much that there's not a lot he reuses to account for all characters. Thus, take the following with a grain of salt, but he draws the eyes in a square-like shape with open endings to the sides. Also, he tends to be very specific on how to draw the protagonist versus the more antagonist characters, with sometimes even pure white eyes of rage, mystique and authority, which is a trope we actually see in a lot of Western art. For the rest, his facial features totally depends on the game. He tends to be a fan of defined noses, with his more recent styles showing stronger jawlines compared to what he did in the past. Sounds a bit fake? I agree. Here's the kicker though. In truth, his style is more character dependent than anything else. What do I mean by this? How he draws the details of Ryu in different styles are generally the same. This counts for all his characters. To me, this is extremely cool. Ryu and Ken have the same thick eyebrows with sharp edges no matter the aesthetic of the style. Akuma's nose and facial proportions are always broad. The expressive chin and lips of Sagat and the funny expression of Zangief are always present. From here we can dissect way more into his art style. Bengus really wants to show the visual cues and character personality through his art, no matter the technical style of it. It's no wonder that the art director asked him to do a lot of story ending screens and panels. His gestures are spot on. Some are very telling, others are a bit weird, but with one picture alone we have a good gist of what's going on. At least, yeah, nice. In case of an enemy, Bengus' character ratios are pretty normal for fighting games. However, he tends to add a tuft of steroids to the mix. Like I said before, his art is a perfect translation to the in-game graphics, using more roundish curves, and generally goes for clean and polished line art in his final concept works. Like most pros, his rough line art is quite sketchy, and I think it looks really nice overall. Some of his art clearly show how he likes to emphasize the entire gesture of a character. Indeed, that's what I think is the key definition of his style. He captures the essence of characters through expression and body language. And no, he doesn't do it exactly like Kina Nishimura either, who on herself is a visual storyteller on a different level. Bengus does it with contrasting silhouettes, and I think it's something we all can learn from. Ryu and Ken are the best duo to explain this. We all know they are rivals, yet best friends, and they show this in their visual appearance. That's just character design, similar yet different. However, Bengus emphasizes their differences in each game he works on. Ryu is the lone warrior who seeks strength through discipline and hard work. Ken is the outgoing, affluent fighter who draws his strength from his loved ones. Bengus deliberately contrasts their body language in each installment, showcasing different personalities and gestures that align with their expected traits, all the while keeping the shoulder widths in place. And there's many of these type examples as well. He loves the rivalry and friendship aspect of this duo. It's not just Ryu and Ken either. Bengus explores the dynamics of all characters' relationships, especially those with strong connections. It's another level of art that makes us more relatable to the character's mindset. It doesn't matter which character we look at, and we all can probably get a good gist of who they are and what they stand for. In this case, I'm also talking about the way he does expressions. All fighting game artists have their own take on the characters. This means, despite that they all adhere to similar personality rules, it's their job that we as observer connect to these characters on a similar level. But do all pros emphasize gesture? Not really. Just for fun, this is how an RPG character designer, Tetsu Nomura, draws the Final Fantasy Dissidia fighting game characters. Cool, anime styled and whatnot. Their gestures all look similar and plain, stiff even. Before you comment, I'm not shitting on Nomura at all. Just showing the difference in intent and efforts. I mean, it could be way worse. After reading a couple of transcripts, it's clear that Bengus is a very shy person. He actually noted that he finds it nerve-wracking to do interviews at all. He did share some interesting stuff though. To quote him, "Up until junior high school, copying anime and manga pictures was practically all I did, but once I hit high school, I didn't really draw much at all. I read that he mainly copied Matsumoto and Akira Toriyama's illustrations back in the day. And he said he likes the artists Go Nagai and Sakura Momoko." A quote from his peer in a Capcom team interview. He was at a point when he wasn't even familiar with paints, let alone liquid text. On the contrary, it might be better for one to come in without any prior knowledge. When speaking of art tools, Bengus didn't tell much about it. Most of what I could find in his personal comments is that he used Copic markers, liquid text, and acrylic gouache. But he did note that he used to do his art traditional, but he was way more interested in digital art. Overall, I think that when Bengus sees an art style, he absorbs it like a sponge. And he takes whatever art detail he finds interesting or key and creates something new entirely. He mentioned that he is a perfectionist. He wants to make art without feeling the need to improve it further. Actually, some of his specific art comments are his regrets of not changing certain expressions. While in contrast, Kina Nishimura regrets the technical side of her works. In my eyes, I think Bengus is testing specific effects and style concepts he sees in other artists while doing promotional art. And I might miss the mark on this, but I just noticed that so many of his art contain elements he didn't use somewhere else. One thing that struck me is that most of his group pictures tends to vibe more towards movie-style posters. However, when he was asked which particular aspect of his job was the toughest, he said, "Nothing in particular, but actually drawing the pictures is the most enjoyable part for me." To me, it confirms once again that those who love the process more than the reward have found the unbeatable Ikigai formula of life. I'm light novel author GP Films, and if you want some serious art style inspiration, just check out Bengus. He has it all. His last quote is particularly inspiring. "We each have our own reasons to pursue art."